Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be doing the year in review tag, which was created by Dom from Dominish Books. And this is one I feel like should have been a lot easier than it was, but I actually had a hard time coming up with answers for some of these questions. But I figure it is a good time to do this sort of thing because of the fact that, believe it or not, and I'm still kind of in the not believing it, the year is nearly over. So with that, let's jump into this. I will have Dom's video linked below so that you can check that out, and let's jump in. So the first question is, what your favorite book of the year? So this is a hard one to pick because I have read so many fantastic books this year, and so what I decided to go with is a book that I absolutely loved in a series that I've absolutely been loving, which is Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb. Now, Royal Assassin, which I also did read this year, had been my favorite Hobb book. I think between Golden Fool and Fool's Fate, I kind of ended up taking that over, so I went with this. Honestly, it's so hard to rate a lot of her books against each other because I've really loved all of them, and I've read a ton of other books that I also really, really loved, but Fool's Fate was just so good. I can't wait to continue this series. I just absolutely loved Realm of the Elderlings, and it's, even though I'm not done yet, very much already entrenched in my top series of all time. So I think that's definitely a good answer for this one. So number 2 is your favorite series started this year but not finished. So this one was harder than it should be because of the fact that there's a couple of series I started and finished, and I specifically was making an effort to finish a couple of things by the end of the year. So with that, I had to really think of what series did I start and not really continue. And there are several series that I read like the first book of and hadn't continued. And at first I was going to try and see if there's anything I went further, but I think for the most part, series I've started, I did really continue most of them. So what I ended up going with is the Draenei Saga by David Gemell, and this is the first book, Legend, in publication order, not in chronological order. And I meant to read a lot more Draenei this year, and I didn't. And this one works because I read this year, and I have not read more. There are a few other series I started last year that I haven't finished that I could have done, but I had started them prior to this. There's 2 specific series. I read book 1 last year and the rest of it this year, but that technically doesn't fit the question. I really do want to read more Draenei. I really enjoyed Legend, and I'm really excited to continue. I just have not slotted any more in. So I figured this is a good one for a series that I really liked, but I just did not end up continuing to finish this year. Number 3, favorite series finished this year. Now, the answer to this is most likely going to be Chrono Stars by Kate Elliott. The thing is, though, I'm filming this on December 12th. I'm not done with the last book quite yet. So, I can't in good conscience say that even though I've absolutely loved this series and I'm trying to get everyone to read the series, this is another one that is already entrenched with the top series, but I feel like I need to get to the end of it before I definitively say overall that this is the best series I finished this year, because there's another fantastic series I finished this year that I did finish, and that is Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn by Tad Williams. This is another one that jumped up into one of my top favorites. I absolutely just loved this trilogy, despite the fact that this book was, you know, a brick. I mean, bigger than multiple bricks most of the time. I never once got bored or really had parts I didn't like. This was a trilogy that I just absolutely loved. There are more Ostenard books, and I do plan to read them, but this was the original trilogy. The other books didn't come until much later. So that I've actually finished as a filming, I'm pretty sure that has to go to Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I can't think of anything else that jumped out above this for the year so far, at least until I finish Chrono Stars. So we'll have to see. Number 4, favorite new author discovered this year. So this is another fun one because I read the first book of Realm of the Elderlings last year. I read the first book of Crown of Stars last year. I read the bulk of them during this year, and so did most of it then, but they're ones I started And so I had to look at authors that I did start this year that jumped that high. Probably not a surprise considering the answer to the last question, but Tad Williams is getting this one too. Tad Williams is getting some representation 3 in a row here, but I had never read Tad Williams. I was aware of Tad Williams, and I don't know why it took me so long to read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, but I've already been amassing the next Austin Ard books. I want to read, he's got some other series too. He's definitely become an author that I really, really liked and plan to continue absolutely with his books. So as far as a new author, that's probably where that would stand. And then number 5 is, I think, the last Tad Williams related questions, but favorite new character of the year. So this was really hard because I was trying to think, and I could probably come up with a bunch of favorite new characters, and this is probably because I finished it recently, but I decided to go with Binnabik from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn as well, because I loved Binnabik. I loved all of his sayings. Whenever he was around, I was just having a great time. So Binnabik was a character I really, really enjoyed, so decided to go with Binnabik for this one as well. There's so many great characters, but once again, it's that whole from this year thing where there were a couple of large series I technically started last year, so I'm not able to select from them for new characters. So number 6, moving on to something else, favorite new release of the year. Now this was hard because I actually didn't read that many new releases this year. I don't tend to read a ton of new releases because I'll do some like e-arcs and go that route. And I found some that I really liked, but I like to read a mix of older books and somewhat newer books as well. So I didn't read a ton. Like, I read from some of the e-arcs. Some of them don't even come out technically yet, but I read some e-arcs I enjoyed. Like, I recently read Cytonic, which was a new release. But out of the new releases that I read, I think the one that probably took top bill was The Shadow of the Gods by John Quinn. I actually read this originally as an e-arc and then immediately purchased a copy. And this was just a really, really enjoyable book. I did read this before finishing Faithful of the Fallen, and Faithful of the Fallen is definitely up there higher for me. That's another series that is probably in the running for favorite series, and in my top series that I finished this year too. So good to mention some of that. But for this one, Shadow of the Gods, which I don't know yet if I will end up liking this series more than Faithful of the Fallen, because Faithful of the Fallen was a very different style from what this is. But I really, really like this book, and I'm really excited to continue with Bloodsworn Saga. Editing Nico here, and this one I realized I missed a question. So number 7 is your favorite reread of the year. So I've talked before, I normally am a huge rereader, but I had been specifically making an effort not to reread. So the only reread I actually completed this year was the Dragonlance Chronicles, which I did not enjoy nearly as much as I used to when I was younger. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and go with The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, because I got, not too long ago, this beautiful illustrated edition, and I plan to reread this by the end of the year, because it's actually an extremely short book. It looks way bigger just because there's a lot of full-page illustrations in here, sometimes just with color, sometimes actually double page. So there's so much here. So I started this, actually. I read like the prologue and like the first chapter, but I haven't actually finished reread yet. But so this is the one I'm going to go with because I love this, and I'm still planning on finishing rereading this because it'll just take a couple hours really to go through, and I wanted to reread with the lovely illustrations. All right, so number 8 is biggest surprise of the year. And so I've mentioned this author and series quite a lot lately, and for a prompt, my biggest surprise, though, there's no other answer I can give. That has to be Nightfall by Daniel Barnett, which is the first book in the Nightmareland Chronicles. I don't read horror. This series is not at all in my wheelhouse, my comfort zone, the type of things I normally read, and I have loved it. It has been really, really good, and I was just so surprised by how much I enjoyed this series, how much it drew me in almost immediately, and so that definitely had to be the answer for this. I've done some reviews for some of the early books, and I'm in a bi-weekly like buddy read live show thing that is going to be even more awesome. I've enjoyed it so far too with it, but I have enjoyed this series a lot more than I ever would have thought. I kind of picked it up because I'm like, it's really short. I'll give it a try, and just was blown away and was not expecting to be whatsoever. So that definitely has to be my answer here. Number 9, the biggest disappointment of the year. So this one, I even commented in Dom's video, I'm like, this has to be it too, because I've had a few. I have had a few disappointing reads, but the one I had to go with as the most disappointing because of the fact that I had heard so many things about how good it was. There were some other books I read this year that were pretty disappointing, like The Fifth Season, but I'd heard really mixed things, so I had very low expectations. So, like, yeah, I didn't enjoy it, but I wasn't as disappointed. The one I have to go with, I don't have a copy of this book anymore, but would be The Poppy War by Rf Kwong. I hated The Poppy War so much. Pretty much everything about it, the first half, the second half, the characters, the dialogue, the story, just the way everything was done, I really found nothing that redeemed it at all to me. It was just a wholly bad experience for me. I wanted the DNF it very badly, but I didn't because it was a channel buddy read that I had set up, and so I'm like, I'm going to at least finish it, even if I'm going to complain the whole time. So that has to be the most disappointing for me. I still, like, I've heard people talk about it. I don't understand why people like this book. I don't know that I can understand because it's just everything about it. I don't get it. It was just a total disappointment for me. So it kind of is what it is with the Poppy War at this point. So number 10 is the one book from this year you'd recommend to anyone. This is always a really hard question because I tend to read a lot of more niche stuff or just like stuff that's not going to be big for everyone. And a lot of my favorite stuff I've read this year have been series where I'm like, I loved this, but I can see why a big group of people wouldn't. Especially the kind of the slower stuff, which is not going to have a lot of crowd appeal. So I had to really think about this one. What I decided to go with, and there's definitely, I'm sure, people who wouldn't like this either, but one that was just, I thought was a lot of fun and enjoyable and could fit lots of different people's likes, was The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlmann. This one I read in New York too, and I don't have a copy of it at this time, but it was a really fun book. It definitely could have used more plot, but the dialogue and just the narrator, who our main character narrates it in, I've heard the audio actually is fantastic, speaking of, but I don't really do audio. But it was just a fun book, and I feel like it's something that, it definitely has some fantasy, some dark elements, some just general other stuff going on, and I mean, it's a fantasy book, but it was really enjoyable, and I had a nice time reading it, and so I feel like that would be one that a wide group would probably enjoy as well. So I decided to go with that one as a book I read. I used to use Good Omens as a good one that I think most people would probably enjoy, but I did not read that this year. I read that last year, so I had to change my answer. But so those are the 10 prompts for the year in review tag. Like I said, there's so many of these I probably could have put in lots of different answers. I really had trouble narrowing it down. I do need to make some sort of like wrap up talking about my favorite book series of the year or stuff like that at some point. I feel like this was good to prepare me for that because I realized, man, I just read so much good stuff this year. It's really hard to say favorite anything because so many things that I read that I absolutely loved. And like I said, the technicality of starting a couple of big series, the first book last year, also made this harder, but this was a fun one to do, and I feel like helped get some of my thoughts in order for it. So thanks, Dom, for creating this tag and for tagging me in it. Once again, his video is linked down below. Editing Nico again. Would it really be one of my tag videos if I didn't have to come in and mention who I'm tagging in the editing stage? No, it probably wouldn't be. So, for this one, I'm going to tag Yolene Reeds, Johanna, and the Bookaholic Brown Nymph. I will have their channels linked down below. I also want to note that after I was tagged by Dominish on this one, I was actually later tagged by Leanne's Loopy Library also, so I'm going to link her video as well as Dominish's original video there as well. Make sure if you enjoyed this video to give it a like. Check the link in the description for the Wizardly Do It Discord if you want to chat books. Any of these books, let me know in the comments as well what your kind of top 10 stuff is, or you can go into the tag channel in the Discord and do your answers there as well, which is always fun, so that even if you don't have a channel, you can include your stuff here, and let me know your thoughts on all of my stuff as well. Of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.